The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
What do you think's the biggest threat to mankind right now?
I'd say the biggest threat right now is population collapse, the super low birth rate.
Really?
Yeah.
Over like nuclear war, natural disaster?
Don't we have an overpopulation problem?
No, we have an underpopulation problem.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
So this is the most commonly misunderstood situation.
Yeah, they definitely push that we have a overpopulation.
Yeah, why is that?
I don't know. It's just like, this is a holdover from the 70s or something, There was a huge baby boom, where people did have a ton of kids after World War II. But then the birth rate in the U.S. has been below replacement rate since 71 or 72.
I know U.S., but how about other countries?
Well, China's got a huge population collapse problem.
Really?
Yeah. People have no idea how fast the population is going to collapse.
Yeah, that was Elon Musk, and he is so right. The guy's visionary. I think he's so right. I was having a conversation about population stability and implosion. And by the end of the century, they're saying 93% of the nations of the world will be below replacement rate. And that is a bad portent for the future. Those who are fighting for life, those who are open to life, you're making a difference in ways you do not know. You just do not know. And I'm really, really grateful for it. China, I think their population declined 2 million. Elon Musk says they lost population. They're down 2 million people. Now, again, they're 1.4 billion people? But still, 2 million people, percentage-wise, is not huge. But it's the second year in a row that it's happened, and they don't want to see that happen. They're trying to incentivize people to have children. From what the BBC found, the women that they spoke to simply don't want to have kids anymore. They say they can't afford them. When nations become affluent, when you can afford more, have better education, better health care, right? Have plenty of food, they become more selfish and they tend to have less children. And you see this in China. They're just a reflection of nations all over the planet right now. The stats show that if we continue as we're going here in this country, and really as a planet, within 75 years, 14 countries across the country will have at least, they'll have at least replacement level fertility rates of 2.1. 14, that is, every other country will be below replacement rates. 14 countries will be there, the rest of the planet below. So there are still world leaders pushing for it. The French president, back in 2018, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, was in the U.S. He was there for a UN General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly meeting, and he attended a sideline summit sponsored by the Gates Foundation. They're all about population control, right? And it was this summit was called Gatekeepers, right? This little side summit. And he was concerned there are too many people right now in Africa. And he basically wants women there to get more education, because the stats show that the more education a woman has, the fewer children they have, right? Become more educated. You'll see how ridiculous it is. Listen to what he had to say. Listen.
I always say, please present me the lady who decided, being perfectly educated, to have 7, 8, 9 children. Please present me the young girl who decided to leave school at 10 in order to be married at 12. And this is not teaching African people from New York. A lot of African leaders today now dare to have this kind of speech. This is just because a lot of girls were not properly educated. Because people de facto in these countries, but here as well, decided that the rights of these girls were not exactly the same as the rights of the young man, which is unacceptable. I'm fine with a lady having 7, 8 children if this is her choice after education. This is not the case today. That's why for me education is the main answer. First, to avoid the worst. Second, to maximize opportunities in African countries and in the rest of the world. Third, to properly monitor demography, because it will be a chosen demography.
I mean, that's just crazy. I shouldn't even have played as much of it as I did, because he equates education to a form of birth control. If you have an educated woman, any educated woman would not have 7 or 8 kids, right? He says this, the key sentence there was, present me the woman who decided, being perfectly educated, to have 7, 8, or 9 children. Amy Coney Barrett is another one. Catherine Pakaluk is going to join me in a moment. She's another one. She's got her PhD. She's a doctor. It didn't end well for the French president, Emmanuel Macron. Dr. Pakaluk, she basically, by the way, she teaches economics at the Catholic University of America. Very smart lady, right? Started a hashtag on Twitter. It was called Postcards for Macron. And she put up a picture of her in her Harvard doctoral gown with 6 of her 8 children, right? So the hashtag got picked up and then it went viral, right? Soon dozens, all these other women started posting pictures of their 7, 8, 9 children after having been, quote, perfectly educated, right? And so after that experience, she decided to start talking to other women who, like her, were defying the status quo. They were having more than just 1 or 2 children or not choosing to have any at all. There's a need for them. We talked about this ad nauseum. South Korea's fertility rate is 0.7. Here in the United States, states like Massachusetts and Oregon, right, the 1.5. Replacement rate's 2.1, by the way. You see those families with 4 or more children. Why are they doing it, right? They're open to life and they are making a difference. It's a delight to have with me today the director of social research, an associate professor at the Bush School of Economics at Catholic University, Dr. Catherine Pakaluk. Doctor, welcome. Thank you for being here. Love talking to you, and I'm so grateful for your witness to life.
Oh, you're welcome. It's such a pleasure.
Well, you teach microeconomics, if I am correct. Mm-hmm. That might sound like an obvious question, but how much does the family impact the economic life of a country? Because, you got Macron over there thinking it's ridiculous and, we're overpopulated and, they want to reduce population, not increase it. How does family play a role in the economy of any country?
Right. Well, I like to say there's no more economic question than where people come from. Yep. Right. And so, for a long time, the Western countries, France being no exception, just taken it for granted that people will come from somewhere. There'll be people. And I think there's been also a smugness as the West has adjusted to that kind of higher standard of living, that they benefited from their own population growth in the 19th century, which was made possible by a great, robust economy. That was great. These countries grew. And then there was this smugness where they thought, well, we'll just import people from other parts of the world as we start to slow down and we don't have to do this. So yeah, how does a family impact? You got to have people if you want to have economic growth, right? So people have to provide goods and services, and they do so to succor their own families. And so there's no chance for economic prosperity without people.
I often think about Paul Ehrlich, and the author of The Population Bomb.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, there's not going to be enough food to feed people. What are we going to do? What have we seen from the 1970s forward? I mean, if God... One of the great gifts of God is our intellect and technology. We could feed the world many times over today, right? With the technologies, the fertilization, the equipment, the things that we now have. So, if you're open, my grandmother always would say to me, she says, Drew, because I had my kids. I mean, I have nowhere near your kids. And by the way, you have 15 kids? Am I correct in my recollection?
Yeah, we're really blessed. I married a widower, and so we together raised his children, and then we had 8 together.
Yeah, so your number's 15, though, right? I had 5. I feel small next to you, right? But I had them one right after the other, right? They were about a year and a half apart. They were coming pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I got a little nervous. I'm a father. I had to try to provide. And my grandmother once said to me, she says, for every child God gives you, he'll give you a loaf of bread. Meaning that God will provide. Yeah. And his providence has been pretty amazing. I'm sure you saw that in your own life.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. In my own life, in spades, there's no promise, right? I mean, this is like how it works. There's no promise that God will make things easy for us, but there is a promise that kind of like with his grace, things will work out, right? Things will work out. It's been true in my life, and it was true for all the people I ended up talking to, all around the country. And I guess I would like to say that they said something like, the wisdom of having children proves itself in the long run. That, that so it looks impossible in the short run, but it proves itself in the long run.
I know you're writing a book, too. It's not out yet, too. What's the title of that, by the way?
It's called Hannah's Children, the story of the women quietly defying the birth dearth. And Hannah is the biblical Hannah. This is a tough book to write for a lot of reasons. And, if you profile a lot of women with a lot of children, you get this question like, are you out swinging for people to have 10 kids? You think that's the only valuable way to live? Right. What are you interested in here? Right? And so I worked really hard to think, like, what is this about? What is this book about? What is it mean to talk about people who are open to life, open to having children. Because none of the people I talked to said they set out to have 5 or 10. And like you said, you got the children God sent you. And at some point it came to me, called inspiration. The biblical Hannah is somebody who represents this idea of entrusting your family to God's providence, entrusting your motherhood to God's providence. And so we know Hannah, she's the one who goes and prays to be relieved from being barren. And then God sends her Samuel, and it's such a beautiful story. And she brings Samuel back to the temple, and she gives him back. And any mother who reads this is sort of heartbroken at the thought that she's leaving Samuel. And what almost none of us know, and I didn't know until I wrote this book, that the priest takes pity on her, and he prays to God, and he says, we've got to reward this woman for her faith, bringing Samuel back. Her most precious possession is Samuel. And God sends her 5 more children.
Wow.
Astonishing. So
That's
those are Hannah's
story.
children, are the children that are born not just of her plea to have children at all, but of her faith in God, that God would provide for her. And it's just a beautiful story. So to me, the heart of the biblical Hannah, what she stood for, that's really the thing I was after. I wanted to profile that. That's, I think, the spirit of both just devotion to God, trust in his providence, like all those things, being open to life and being open to his will, even if it's not going to be more children. So
God is good. Let's grab a few calls for you. 888
great.
914-9149. Agnes is in Chicago. Hi, Agnes. Thanks for joining us. You're on the air with Dr. Catherine Pakaluk.
Hello there. I was blessed with 9 children.
Oh, wow.
And there were 3 misses in between, but I was blessed with 9. And people used to say, how can you dare on one income to have 9 children? I said, well, every time I got pregnant, my husband got a promotion and a raise. It was enough to cover the next kid. So we figured we were doing what God wanted.
Wow, what a great story.
God bless you.
Agnes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for calling. I love that. For every child that she had, her husband got a promotion or a raise. What have you seen, Doctor? Did you see the hand of God's providence? And, what are some of the challenges of raising 15 kids?
We raised the children that we had for the most part before I even started working. I was a graduate student most of that time, and my husband's a philosopher, so, that doesn't go along with a big paycheck. But I don't know. I mean, it seemed like, when we needed to, we found hand-me-downs and used things, and we shot, secondhand, and we drove used cars, and I don't know. It seemed like it always worked out. And I always just asked myself the question, would I rather have the next child or a nicer car? And like for me, at least, the answer was always like, I'd rather just try it for the next child, that just seems better. But it's mysterious how God provides.
Yeah,
right?
I always feel bad because, I think it's fear or maybe a lack of trust in God that causes a lot of women. You might have 2 kids or 3 kids and 4 kids. Like I know a lot of, I've got some nieces, nephews, and people who after they have X amount of kids, they're like, I can't afford it anymore. I don't want any more, And I know people who have had tubal ligations or vasectomies because they think, if we have another child, what are we going to do? There's probably people listening right now. There's probably a man or a woman right now who's thinking about having a vasectomy or a tubal ligation, having the tube side. And they're saying because we just can't have another one. And we don't have the room, we don't have the car, we don't have the finances. I think it's rooted in lack of trust in God.
Yeah.
How do you rise above that? I mean, what advice should you give to somebody who's saying, you don't know my situation?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say too, you see it like you're describing the people who are ready to stop. But I also want to say, like with the Catholic audience, you see this in young people getting married. They're getting married, and God bless them, they get married, but then they say we got to wait for 2 or 3 or more years until we have these numbers of things. And I think there's a job to be done there of just kind of spreading this kind of good news. Like, you can put 4 kids in one bedroom. Like I've done that, lots of times. That probably Agnes did too. And you can put 5 or 6 in one bedroom. But actually your kids love that. Like those are gifts. So part of the job to be done here is actually taking the stories of women like your caller, Agnes, and really elevating them to the public conversation. For so long, we viewed their stories as sort of not relevant or important for the future of this country. And I just think that's been a mistake. And so like the thing that gives me the most excitement here is to take her story and put it out and say, actually, maybe Agnes's story is the most important thing we can listen to right now.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Final thoughts before I let you go. Emmanuel Macron made that comment. Your thing went viral. What do you make of educated women having children?
Well, I think it's actually the future, and I think that telling the good news of having children is something that we could do. It's how the gospel spread in the early days and how it's going to spread today, right? So we just roll up our sleeves and tell the good news.
It's amazing how off point he was on that. I saw his logic, but it was a little flawed. Hey, Catherine, thanks.
Great.
Have a great one.
Thanks a lot, Drew.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk
Bye.
soon. Hey, this episode of the Drew Mariani Show is on the Relevant Radio app. The Relevant Radio app is completely free, and it's updated daily with fresh articles, podcasts, and prayers. So don't delay. Download the app today. Thanks for listening.